Hello and welcome back to Gimbel's Tip of the Week, practical suggestions for building a more profitable and productive law practice. Today we're sharing a pricing strategy tip that will help you avoid fee disputes and push back on your invoices. Every month, members of our Practice Accelerator membership get a specialist coaching session with business development, pricing and project management, legal technology, or finance and accounting experts. Last week, we shared a business development tip, and there's a link to that in the show notes below. This week, we're continuing the series with a tip from Aileen Leventon, the pricing and client value coach inside the membership. I'm David Skinner. I'm a lawyer and a Lean Six Sigma coach. I am also global advisor on legal process improvement to the International Institute of Legal Project Management. I help lawyers and others in the legal profession build efficient practices that they can scale and grow without spending every waking moment in the office. In her recent coaching session, Aileen shared some great advice on ways to develop flat fees. But one nugget that really stood out was this: fees are not prices. Don't ever forget out-of-pocket expenses when you are quoting the cost of your services to a client. It seems obvious, right? Of course, there will be expenses, but clients and attorneys perceive fees and expenses very differently. You must think about it from your client's perspective and not your own. Let's say you quote a client $10,000 for your fee. You're thinking about the fee that you're going to collect, $10,000. The client is thinking about the price they're going to pay, $10,000. But let's say that in this matter you incur $2,000 of legitimate, reimbursable out-of-pocket expenses. What does that mean? You send your invoice for the fee plus disbursements. The client writes a check for $12,000. You pocket $10,000 and disperse the other $2,000. You say to yourself, it was a $10,000 fee. The client is saying, my lawyer costs me $12,000 and it was only supposed to be $10,000. That's a 20% variation between what the client thinks it costs and what you're thinking you charge the client. To your clients, out-of-pocket expenses are part of the price they'll pay, so you need to provide an estimate for them. Expenses may be variable, so either you build in a cushion as you're discussing the variation in the fee and the price, so that you don't end up being out of pocket, or you agree to pass the expenses on directly to the client, if that makes sense. For example, you could say there are going to be out-of-pocket expenses. I'll forward them to you, and you pay them directly. Then, when thinking about what they paid you, all your client focuses on is the $10,000 fee. On the other hand, you may decide that for timing or other legitimate reasons, you will be responsible for paying the third-party expenses you incur on behalf of the client's matter. If that's going to be the case, be transparent. Remember, clients value predictability. Providing reasonable estimates and communicating early if actual expenses look like they're going to exceed what you estimated is really important. In either case, be clear and upfront with your client. Maybe lay out the options for handling expenses and let your client decide. Regardless of what you do decide, just remember that you've got to be sure the client understands the difference between the fee that they're going to pay you for your professional services and the payment or reimbursement of necessary out-of-pocket expenses. They are not the same thing. And that's it for this week's tip. If you missed the Ideal Client Worksheet from last week, I'll put another link to it in the show notes below the video. Also, don't forget to check out the information about our membership. In addition to a monthly masterclass, members get coaching with us and with our experts twice a month, and that's a very cost-effective way to access expert advice. The membership only opens to new members twice a year, but you can always get on the waiting list, and we may even just do a special offer for people who are on the waiting list, so stay tuned. There's a link to get on the waiting list in the notes below. See you next week for another expert tip on building a profitable and productive law practice. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you next week.